worship service of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Lakeland. My name is Heather Norby. I use the pronouns she and hers, and I'm the spiritual life director for this congregation. I also attend seminary at Meadville Lombard Theological School. And in an effort to keep you all updated on my studies, I excitedly share with you that I have just started a queer theology and ethics course for the summer. And I'm super excited. We are glad you are here, whether in person or virtually. UUCL is an affirming community, and whatever your gender identity, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, abilities, or theological beliefs, you are welcome here. We would love to get to know you better, so please join us after the service on the patio or the social hall, or if on Zoom, please say hello through the chat feature. Our newsletter is published every Wednesday, and it is the main source of what goes on around here. So be sure to sign up or read it, of course, if you already receive it. I just want to highlight a couple especially important things. We were supposed to have our annual dinner this Wednesday. However, we mistakenly booked at the same time the Buddhists were having their retreat, and since they're going to be in silent meditation and we were going to do karaoke, we maybe figured we should move it. So we are working on June 15th, just a week later, Wednesday night, June 15th, for our annual dinner. It's a potluck. It will be fun. It will be here in the sanctuary. So please, everyone is welcome to come join us for that as we celebrate the end of this fiscal year and the fact that we've moved to a different stage of the pandemic, and, you know, we're doing great. So come celebrate with us. We are participating in Polk Pride this year. The Pride and Faith service is at Beacon Hill on June 16th, and Brandon and I will be speaking, and our choir members will be singing in the choir, so please come join us at Beacon Hill Fellowship on June 16th at 7 p.m. And then also we will have our booth, our tent, in the Pride in the Park on Saturday, June 18th. So everyone's welcome to come on out to that. It's lots of fun. Okay. And before I move on, I have so much gratitude for the people that worked so hard around the building this week. Tim McLean and Maggie Colson and her fiance Chris Little cleaned up and painted the social hall. So you will notice there's a fresh new coat of blue paint in the social hall. It looks great, and I think they did some organizing as well. And also, Petra Sussman and Mark Gatsky cleaned out and painted this closet on Friday, and then Petra and Brandon Knuckles and I came in on Saturday, and we put in the shelves that Ken and Dorothy went to Sam's Club and got and delivered for us, and we reorganized and got all our tech stuff put in there. So, you know, as we learn new ways of doing church, we have to reorganize ourselves and get rid of the old stuff and in with all the new tech stuff. So that was fun. So thank you to all those folks that are helping us do that. And also, of course, our set today was Petra Sussman. Thank you for making it beautiful here in Petra. Well, for this month of June, our worship and programming theme is Celebrating Blessings. So let us begin our journey together by entering into this sacred space where we celebrate our connected circle of life. Breathe in with me. Breathe in, feeling the spirit of love in the center of your soul. And breathe out that love towards all your relations. Connected, we are whole. Choir is prepared a hymn for us to get us started. course, everyone will be invited to sing along. I think that you might know the words. We will improve over the month as we sing it each week.
And get more of the choir members back.
You should all have gray hymnals, hopefully, and you can open them to number 443, which is a responsive reading that Kino chose, one of his favorites. It's called "We Arrive Out of Many Singular Rooms." And I will begin, and you will respond with the words in italics, I believe. It's 443. We arrive out of many singular rooms, walking over the branching streets.
We come to be assured that brothers and sisters around us to restore their images in our eyes.
We enlarge our voices in common speaking and singing.
We try again that solitude found in the midst of those who with us seek their hidden reckonings.
Our eyes reclaim the remembered faces. Their voices stir the surrounding air.
The warmth of their hands assures us, and the gladness of our spoken names.
This is the reason of cities, of homes, of assemblies and the houses of worship.
It is good to be with one another.
Let us signify the creation of this sacred space where we join together to celebrate blessings. Let us light our chalice, the symbol of our faith. Today our chalice lighter is Dorothy Lemmy. The chalice lighting words that I will read were written by Reverend Scott Taylor. We come today longing and looking for a blessing. In our loneliness, may we find the blessing of connection. In our doubt, may we feel the reassurance of a love that will not let us go. In the dullness of our senses, may the blessings of unexpected gifts be ours. In our fear, may the blessing of courage return. May this flame we now light remind us to look up and around one more time. May it help us notice the blessings that are always waiting for us and wanting to tell us that we are now and always home. Please join us in singing and signing. You have double duty today. Justin is out, and so you'll notice it takes 3 of us to cover his job, their job. We're going to sing and sign Spirit of Life. Hymn number 123, it's in the book. soon as our pianist is ready. You could sing with it. I think that was true.
Trying to get the Spanish up. There we go.
We sing it in English and in Spanish. First we'll sing it in English, which is in the book, and then we'll sing it in Spanish, which is in the book. To honor the weaving of joys and sorrows that run throughout all of our lives. We engage in this ritual every week as a way to nurture, as a way to heal, and as a way to celebrate all the blessings in our lives. So we will invite you up to the chalice table to place shells for your joys and sorrows into our bowl of sand. If you are on Zoom, we will say your name and put a shell in for you so that we all know that we are together and connected, striving towards wholeness. You are welcome now to come. Jeanette Manning, who just had hip replacement surgery and is at home recovering. Nancy Morse, who's on Zoom. And for Justin Neal, who's out with some serious back pain today. What a blessing it is to be in this world. A unique spinning globe with an almost incomprehensible amount of diversity of living things. Diversity is not something that we can live without. Yet why does it seem so hard for some to accept? Sameness will not support us. So let us celebrate the blessing of diversity. In this universe, we also know that change is at the core of all that exists. Yet we tend to cling to that sameness once again, to that which we know, to that which we think is normal. But all that can be like a poison, stunting our growth as a species in this interconnected web of existence and holding us back in fear, keeping us from the ways that affirm and uphold life. Instead, let us celebrate the blessing that is change, the blessing that is novelty and first times. For without first times, we wouldn't have the great diversity of species we experience on this beautiful earth. Create no images of God, writes Octavia Butler in her visionary fiction piece, Parable of the Sower. She writes, accept the images that God has provided. They are everywhere, in everything. God is change. Seed to tree, tree to forest, rain to river, river to sea, grubs to bees, bees to swarm, from one, many, from many, one. Forever uniting, growing, dissolving, forever changing. The universe is God's self-portrait. To take a worshipful journey today with our member Keno Hicks into the world of evolution and wild animals gives us a time to contemplate diversity and change. It gives us time to celebrate the life around us, to allow us to deepen our senses of relationship with that life, and to discover a little bit about who we are ourselves. We are, of course, just as much a blessing as all the life around us, and even more so when we recognize our interconnectedness and nurture that life so we can all grow and change. Please rise in body or spirit and join me in singing hymn number 175 in your gray hymnal. We celebrate the web of life.
Thank
like to introduce our member, Keno Hicks. For those of you that don't know, Keno has been here for over 50 years in this congregation. That's a long time. I mean, he's older than that. Keno also, some time ago, was an environmental advisor to the Florida Department of Transportation, in which he helped build a wildlife passage, correct? And so doing environmentally sustainable work is a part of who Keno is and what he enjoys doing and talking about. And so today he's going to talk to us about these wild animals, about diversity and change and all that goes with it.
As I start, I'm watching for my signal that the recording is taking place.
Yes, it is.
It is now taking
Yeah.
place? Okay. Now, the original title was Evolution, Darwin, and Wild Animals. But I subtitled Wild Animals that Travel on Many Different Paths. Many different paths. Today, I want to offer an intellectual and a religious reflection on wild animals and use various pathways or various ways to look at them for contemplation. Before I start that reflection, I would say I've been designated a historian for the congregation, and in that capacity, let me relate that this is the first Sunday in June, a Sunday that had a certain ritual done on this Sunday for almost 40 years before being discontinued about 25 years ago. This first Sunday in June used to be the annual picnic Sunday. We would go to, the congregation would go to parks and lakes. Often we would get a screened-in enclosure, and we had members that had houses over in Lake Arietta, and we'd swim in the lakes. So then the church would close down for 3 months. There were no Sunday services, June, July, and August, until the first Sunday after Labor Day, when we start back again. Now that tradition came from the Unitarians in Boston, who for the most part were a lot of super rich people, and they had their summer homes they would go to, and so the churches would be empty and they'd close down for 3 months, and that carried over nationwide to all Unitarian congregations. We used to do that, but in the late 1990s it was decided that for various reasons people church shop in summer and so on. Sunday started having services every Sunday, but maybe someday the first Sunday in June will be an annual picnic ritual again. I have that hope. But that, not necessarily that we shut down Sunday services after that, but just a wish. When I was a boy, there was a neighbor, an old man that had been in the British Army in the 1920s in India. And he said a Hindu priest had taught him there are many paths to God and good. As a little kid going to the Assembly of God Sunday School, where they said there's only one true, correct religion, that's the Assembly of God. But I heard other groups, the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons, and all these groups were saying their group was the only correct way. And when this opened my mind, when the Hindu priest symbol said there were many paths, and Tom Smith was this fellow's name, and bless his memory, that's one of the reasons I'm a Unitarian Universalist today, because he taught me what the Hindu priest taught, a little bit of history. Also, real quick, I was in Indiana, and I used to participate with a Unitarian group in Columbus, Indiana. They rented out part of their facilities to a Reformed Jewish group, which are one of the more modern, liberal groups. And in the last of January, we would have a celebration called Tu B'Shvat, which is a celebration of all the things that plants give us. The creation, wood to build things, cotton to make clothes, food. And we'd drink a little white wine for all the light-colored foods, pears and things they had. And then a little later, we'd drink a little red wine for the apples and all. We got feeling pretty good, you know? And so, along that line, instead of celebrating plants, today I thought it might be a good thing to celebrate the gifts of the creation of wild animals, not domesticated animals. That's another program. Observing wild animals has played a role in both religion and science. When I first came here, I found that there was an effort to reconcile religion and science because there can be conflict. And actually, there was conflict in this story of creation when I was a kid, and they said, you know, God created the earth in 7 days and all this. And then I came here, and Charles Darwin was talked about evolution, life form progressed over millions of years. But here, there was encouragement to be open-minded, to study science, but also study other religions for inspiration. And I discovered Taoism for one of the things here, which has complementary duality, where there are dualities, male and female, for example, the big one. They don't have to be one superior and one inferior, as a conflicting duality says there always has to be one correct way. Look at all the tragedy and woe that has brought to the world to say there's only one correct way. But with yin and yang, complementary duality, science and religion can be complementary, and I have found that to be the case here. And one of the things I appreciate so much, Heather calls upon the ancestors. And I want Heather to know the ancestors are real proud of you for calling upon their name. I practice shamanism, which I'll talk about a little bit later, and I'm in contact with the ancestors some of the time. But to start off, let's mentally travel back in time. Have you ever thought about the fact that you had a 700 generation old grandmother or grandfather? Really and truly, there were real people that went back in time. I have always been fascinated in central France by the Magdalenian people. They were reindeer hunters for the most part. This is counting 4 generations for 100 years or 40 generations every 1,000 years. That goes back about 700 generations. In the Magdalenian people, these are the people that went into the caves and did the art, honoring the animals. Now remember, since there was an abundance of wild animals, there was an abundance of food, and they had leisure time. They didn't have to struggle so much, so they were able to dedicate part of their time to art. And they went into caves, and what was it they represented in art? The wild animals that brought them food. So these people expressed this awe and reverence for the mystery of creation. Now, these were wild animals before domestication had ever occurred, but they were a religious expression. Now, also, I studied Hinduism, and I learned that you can have your own personal name for God. There's not one name for God. There's many, and there can still be more, the Hindus say. My personal name for God is the creating force. I started out creative, and a Unitarian minister, who sometimes said he was an atheist, said, Keno, don't you think this process is ongoing, creation, the creating? Wouldn't it be better to call it the creating force? So I sometimes tell the story how my atheist Unitarian minister helped me get closer to God. The creating force is my word. And when I came here and I heard about Charles Darwin and evolution was honored and the theory of evolution accepted, I went through a major mental transformation to accept this idea of evolution, different from the history of humans presented in the Judeo-Christian Bible. Finally, I was able to reconcile and see that, you know, symbolically they say to God 1 day is as 1,000 years and 1,000 days is 1 year. I came to see symbolically that the story of creation in the Bible and evolution are actually in harmony. Because in both stories, life began in the oceans, creatures came on land, and then it all came to a point where humans appeared. So there is harmony there that I found. Now, how did Darwin arrive at his conclusions about evolution? By observing wild animals. In large part, when he was in the Galapagos Islands, where he observed that animals on different islands had adapted to different conditions and evolved different physical features. So that helped me see the creating force operates in many ways, in many paths. Not one way, many paths. That's very important to carry forward this message of Unitarian Universalism. And when I'm gone, I hope some of you will remember and use the symbol from the old Hindu priest that there are many paths to God and goodness. But since we have some atheists among us, I changed it to God and or goodness. So I put a slight modification on it. That's allowed here, you know. To modify things, you don't have to accept it just full force. A new book I've been reading is called The Planetary Emergency, Environmental Collapse, and the Promise of an Eco-Civilization by Kent Shifford. Now, there's the old metaphor that we can use animals to measure danger. What's the famous one? The canary in the coal mine. Because when noxious gases would build up, the canary in the cage in the coal mine would keel over, and everybody knew they better get out of there till it was better air. So looking at animals can be a way of measuring our status on Earth. Now, Mr. Shifford, in this book, Planetary Emergency, he says that our world is dominated by what he calls hyper-civilization. And a lot of people think the only way to live is to accept modern life. Everybody has to have a car to drive in, right? Well, maybe there could be another way. This hyper-civilization is hyper-industrial, chemical, technological civilization, which is devouring the natural environment of our planet. So, as we look at this hyper-civilization that dominates our planet, let's look. The Magdalenians observed animals. Darwin observed animals. Let's observe some animals here. In Africa, in 1970, there were 4.5 million elephants. In 2012, they were down to 400,000, about 10% of what they used to be. Between 1970 and 1995, 30,000 black rhinoceroses disappeared because of loss of habitat and poachers. Now they only number about 3,000. Other species of rhinos, the white rhinos and the Indian rhinos, are down to, they used to be 500,000 in 1900. Now they're down to 30,000. Lions in 1975 numbered 250,000 in Africa. Now they're down to 30,000. Is this a signal to us with this hyper-civilization we have on Earth that we may need to reconsider? 1/3 of American songbird species are in rapid decline. In Europe, it's calculated that half of the species are threatened with extinction. Now, to return to Charles Darwin. Mr. Shifford, in his book Planetary Emergency, says much of modern environmentalism can be traced back to the world picture that Darwin gave us and helped us see. He began a process of discovery that would recapture an understanding of the wholeness of nature, including us humans as part of nature and not separate from it. The Judeo-Christian tradition says, and many other religions, that humans are separate from nature, special beings. But Darwin helped us understand that we are part of nature. He was famous, his talk about survival of the fittest was distorted and misused in a lot of ways, and it's not been pointed out often enough that he also highlighted cooperation in the natural world. Wolf packs, lion prides of lions, elephants, bees, ants. There's many examples in nature of cooperation that was important. In 1869, a German physician, Ernst Haeckel, after he studied Darwin, he invented the term ecology to mean a study of organisms in relationship to each other and their environment. The importance of observing the environment and reaction of wild animals to the environment has been nurtured down through time since Darwin, an appreciation of nature, our own transcendentalist tradition among the Unitarians, but in poetry, in paintings. Today, I have a friend who's considered one of the top 50 wildlife artists in the world, Steve Corey. And he loaned me some of his paintings, which a Florida panther and some eagle and so on, to present and use here, because just as those people 17,000 years ago were painting wild animals to honor the blessings of having wild animals, still today we have artists, and that's one of the favorite things to paint is wild animals. So, also we've had landscape gardening, and biology studies have incorporated evolution, which has been very important. But now so many people live in urban settings, and we're losing touch with nature, and we're forgetting that we are dependent on nature. So Mr. Schiffer says this environmental movement must develop a counter vision of an ecologically based eco-civilization in harmony with the environment. This must replace that hyper-industrial civilization that's cannibalizing our planet. There's not just one way to do things. Beware of people that say there's only one proper way. There are many ways. And one of the things that's got to be challenged is the idea that everybody has to have their own car. Now, okay, we can't have gasoline cars, so we'll have electric cars. Do you know how much mining of copper and how much coal is going to have to be burned in industrial plants, power plants to have electricity? There should be mass transit, as they have in Europe. I've traveled on high-speed trains and been able to go on buses anywhere I want to go. So keep in mind, as we have to make decisions for our society, instead of only one way. Now, and forgive me my little tirade against cars, but it needs to be pointed out that mass transit should be an alternative and another way of thinking of things. But for many years, I studied and I dabbled in shamanism. That's the nature-based religion among primitive peoples, especially among American Indians and Asian primitive peoples. But in versions of shamanism, you have choice. You can choose a power animal as a guide. Now, not just one way, one choice, but a multitude of choices. That appealed to me about shamanism. Now, some of you may, just curiosity, some of you may have been in workshops or classes or with an individual where there was an option and it was talked about choosing a power animal, or you just in your own reading or whatever, you may have a certain feel for a certain animal that inspires you. Has anyone here ever made a choice for a power animal? Okay, we've had several. Okay, that's a topic to talk about one day maybe. There are power animals in operation already here in this congregation. Now, in my looking to wild animals for inspiration, in my shamanic exercises that I've done, I've developed a connection with especially with three power animals. Not one. And I have several minor power animals, but my power animals are an animal called blue bear. Actually, there are a blue-tinged bear in British Columbia. I don't know if you've ever heard about them. There are as among some horses, they have blue-colored horses. That's not common knowledge, but there are blue bears, and one of my power animals is a blue bear. I have another one named Painted Buffalo, and then I have one named Shining Snow Horse. I have a goddaughter in Wichita, Kansas, and when visiting her 3 years ago, she took me to see this statue of an American Indian leader called the Keeper or the Guardian of the Plains. And this statue represents a shaman who saved his tribe in a terrible prolonged drought where they could not grow their crops. Now, you know, among human progression, supposedly our ancestors were hunters, and then we settled down and became agriculturalists, and we could grow more food and have a bigger concentration of people. But in this story of the keeper of the plains, the guardian of the plains, when the drought came, he was able to change his people into buffaloes, where they went out onto the plains and the prairies and lived for several years eating grass until the drought was over, and then they returned to their village. And then they were able to turn back into people. All right, now from anthropology, this story using wild animals is what's called a salvation story. There are many ways to be saved. We got to save ourselves from the planet being deteriorated. Symbolically, those Indians changing into buffalo, maybe it could be interpreted that they had to give up their farming lifestyle in order to go out into the plains and return to a hunting lifestyle to provide food. They lived in tents made from buffalo hides, so people said they became buffaloes. So symbolically, it could have a meaning. But I think it points out the need to occasionally adapt. We may need to go back to some simpler forms of living in our lifestyles in order to be more in harmony with the environment. Just consider that. We may have to give up some things of luxury and convenience that we have today. It's possible. Consider. Mr. Schiffer, in his book Planetary Emergency, has a vision of us changing into an eco-civilization in harmony with our environment, in harmony with plants and animals. So in my role as a shaman, and I often do this, see, not only the Hindu, but for shamanism, because you know, in a lot of the paintings and stories of shamans, they use antlers as headdress. I call upon my power animal, Shining Snow Horse, to symbolically come and take me and take you and take us to a new place in human history where the air is clean and produces clean, shining white snow and produces clean rainwater. Let us cooperate and work to bring a new eco-civilization for those who come after us. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we prepared a song, a fun song for everyone to sing, called All God's Creatures. Thank you, Adam, for filling two roles tonight.
All right, this is the chorus. There's some verses. So enjoy.
The verses to be sung by our two-person
By
choir.
anybody that knows it, please.
Oops, sorry.
Gee.
You ready?
Sure.
All God's creatures got a place in the choir. Some sing low and some sing higher. Some sing out loud on the telephone wire. Some just clap their hands for cooperation we got now.
moments when we can share our treasures with this community as a way to celebrate the blessing that it is to have each other and to have this faith. While our ushers pass the plates for your offering, well, we can sing another song. Morning Has Broken, chosen by Kino, which is hymn number 38 in your gray hymnal. We can multitask.
Where we used to use the book so often in the past, my mother at her church, she said there came a change in her church where they started singing off the wall, you know, and quit using the books. So we're in a blend here, but in the back, closing words, reading 550, if you look in the back of your book, find the title is We Belong to the Earth. And it's attributed to an American Indian chief. 550. I will read the first line, you read the second line. This we know, the earth does not belong to us. We belong to the earth.
This we know. All things are connected like the love which unites us.
All things are connected.
Whatever befalls the earth, befalls the sons and daughters of the earth.
We did not weave the web of life. We are merely a strand in it.
Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves.
Yeah.
What is it? What she said? What they said?
We're going to extinguish the chalice. Kino, do you mind reading the chalice extinguishing words while Dorothy comes up to extinguish the chalice?
Let's see if I got it in my... We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of love, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world.
Thank you, Kino, for your message today and for bringing us some joy. May you all go now out into the world to celebrate diversity and celebrate change and realize that you are nature, not suffering from it. And remember, you are loved, you are worthy, and you
I'm not a fan of all. My brother, however, he's a fan.
It let them go through the mountains and come to this beautiful valley and get vibrations. So when you're talking about, I was thinking about that.
What is the name of the lady who's playing piano? She really was. She's suffering. What key is that?
Yeah, that's a fucking slap of the migration. It's mostly used now as extremist nationalist.
I mean,
That is